Hey everybody, this is Perch. Let's go through this mail. It's how to sell runs that are really miniseries. And this is a problem Marvel has right now is they have a lot of miniseries. They're trying to sell them, but the challenge is there is a stigma against miniseries. And basically the miniseries doesn't really matter. Now, to be fair, I think Marvel has leaned into this problem, meaning yeah, when you're telling your audience that it is a mini series, when you're basically telling your audience, um, we're going to reboot whatever happens here. We're going to introduce a bunch of new characters. In particular, one of the problems that I see with Marvel is with miniseries is the writer is not that excited about the character they're hired to do. So if it's say a Gambit miniseries, the writer is more excited about the supporting cast. Like I'm going to bring in a long lost cousin of Gambit, and I'm also going to have fast talking barista that Gambit's going to see, and then there's going to be a friend who is maybe has a mysterious past. It's like, do you want to write Gambit? By the way, if you think I'm exaggerating, go look at these comics, either miniseries or some of the ongoings that quickly become miniseries, and notice how much attention is given to these random characters you've never seen before. And the premise here is that, maybe the writer really just wants to, they have this crazy hope that the character will get popular somehow. And the supporting character, meaning not the main ones they're hired to write, but the supporting character will get popular. And so then they will, be put in a movie, and then they'll get the name in a movie, and maybe there's still the idea that there's a royalty in it for them. There won't be, but this is kind of the idea that there's money in them hills by building up supporting characters. But the challenge is this: when you're doing a mini series and the writer introduces a supporting cast in this mini series, and then the mini series is invariably canceled because it's a mini series, or it's an ongoing, but it doesn't sell well. So after 5 issues, maybe 8 issues, 10 issues, it's done. No other writer goes back to that supporting cast. So you've got this, you have what has to be at this point thousands of orphan characters all over the place that are they're just out there in comics land, never to be seen again. They're zombies. And so you've educated the audience that when you pick up a miniseries and then it starts to talk about a bunch of characters that have nothing to do with the main character you bought the comic for, the audience is already expecting I will never see these characters again. And so why invest? Why bother paying attention to any of this? Why bother reading it? And that's the problem. So then it accelerates the idea that the sales are low. And then when the sales are low, it gets canceled. And then when it gets canceled, they reboot. And it's like the cycle continues, but it's a race to the bottom. Anyway, let's read this mail. It says, "Dear Reverend Dr. Perch von Perchington, thank you. My sense is that one of the basic problems in comics is that readers want a product that doesn't fit the current business model for Marvel or DC or anyone. But neither has figured out how to give them a different product they might enjoy more. First, the old model was developed because Marvel was artificially constrained during the Silver Age. Stan Lee was limited to only about 8 titles per month. That forced things like depending heavily on team books. It also enabled tight continuity and a unified visual look to the titles. Even in, I disagree slightly, but I get the it's not wrong. Where I disagree is that I don't think that today's world would be impossible to have a similar situation going on. I think visual style was very different. I mean, if we're talking about the 60s, the kind of original Stan Lee era, sure. But when you get into the 70s and other things, you did have differences in art styles, certainly through the 80s, the early 90s. But editorial control was tighter. You didn't have sloppy mistakes. You didn't have a villain used in the same, in 2 different comics the same month. You had some coordination. That has gone away. Anyway, let's continue. Even in the Jim Shooter era, Marvel had a relatively tight line of monthly superhero books relative to today. When Marvel started producing more in the late 80s, the X-Men line effectively split off with its own internal continuity and visual look. That's true, but they still managed to connect the dots with Spider-Man, the Avengers, and other things. While neither Marvel nor DC could stay in the business producing 8 to 12 superhero monthlies, and with a house-style light tight continuity, the sales surge anytime a smaller subline is attempted with the early aughts Ultimate Marvel line or current Absolute BC. Yeah, it's another way you could do it. To me, that is the core issue with the internally faltering run. Customers want to subscribe to H 12 titles per month. The publishers are trying to sell them a lot more than that, so the books rank 9 to 13 on any pull list or a marginal commercial prospect. Assuming that scaling back production is a non starter, I would lean into the series of miniseries nature of modern comics, approve and renew titles for 6-issue arcs, allow gaps between arcs, announce renewals and not cancellations, like Scarlet Witch by Steve Orlando has been renewed for a fifth arc releasing in August 2025 with artist blank, etc. That's a mail. That's one idea. It's not a bad idea. I do think if I'm looking at the current titles, I definitely would cut back a little. I think you do not need 80 books a month. But what you can do is, one, you're going to have to sing, like, this problem doesn't get solved on the cheap. You can't, fix comics, get the distribution, lower costs, keep, hire people. You're going to have to invest some money. And where you want to invest it is in editorial. And what you want to try and get back to is at least some level of coordination. Now, not epic level. I don't think you're trying to shoot for, gym shooter level of control, but frankly, you can get close. One of the reasons why continuity was more labor intensive in the 80s is you didn't have the kind of technology you have today. Today, your entire creative team, writers, editors, junior editors, all the rest, you've got communication tools like Slack, you've got databases where you can put stuff in. Yeah, it may take some work to get into that database. You may have to hire a bunch of interns to do it. But frankly, if websites can do it, if fans can do it on Twitter, you can do it in the company. But that's what's needed. You're going to need to, invest in some technology which will allow you tighter continuity. Look, it is not an impossible problem. You also, frankly, have a lot more editors and junior editors and assistant editors than you did back in the 80s. You do have more. There's this myth going on that editors are overworked. Well, they are, but the staff headcount has gone up. It has gone up certainly in Marvel. DC, kind of hard to say. So, not going to make a call there, but definitely in Marvel, you have more editors today than you did back in the 80s. And you have technology. You have ways to pull this stuff together. It is not impossible for you to do that, but that's what's necessary. Fix the continuity, invest some money there. And then when you have these comics like miniseries and like things coming in and out, give the readers a tether between the books, meaning, have the comic go from, you're maybe, this is a 5-issue arc. Maybe you're doing what you're saying, where you're saying, hey, basically we're going to book for 5 issues and then we can renew it. If you put some marketing behind that, that can work. But do things like, don't let the writers go nuts with, whatever freaking supporting cast they feel like doing at the time. Have some continuity there. It's like, no, these are the characters you're going to use. Hey, here's you're the editor. You could tell the writer, look, while you're doing your little 5-issue arc, I'm going to need you to do a subplot of a couple pages of a villain that we want to use down the road. So, give these titles some interconnectivity so they don't feel disconnected. But the reality is, think back for a moment to that Cena Grace Iceman series, if you will. You had an ongoing series, you had a limited series, you had a one-shot. In this comic, Steve Orlando creates a drag queen character, as I recall. I don't remember the name of the character, but anyway, Cena Grace was very, very proud of it. In Krakoa, I think they went back to this character once. And you had the whole Hellfire Gala, you had, lots of LGBTQ representation, but you never went back to this character that he created. And you could say, well, that character sucked. And you may be right. But as an editor, you need to be able to place these things so that it feels like one series leads to another. You don't pay Cena Grace money if you use that character down the road. That Marvel owns the characters. But the challenge is when you let writers invent whatever they want every single time, none of these books feel like they have any staying power. None of them go from one series to the next. So as a result, they all feel disposable. To me, that's one of the deaths of comics is they can't feel disposable. They need to feel like they all matter. If they don't, then what do you have? And comics have to look. The challenge with the miniseries is that automatically, for decades now, long before this, even in the 80s, a lot of miniseries didn't necessarily connect to the main line. You had writers who were on runs for a long time, whether it's Peter David on the Hulk or on X Factor or Chris Claremont on the X-Men or Grunwald on Captain America. You had these writers with these very long runs, and typically, or not, I don't know about typically, but it was common that miniseries would pop up and they would have other writers doing them, meaning you're not hiring the main series writer to do this miniseries. So as a result, the main series writer would ignore everything that was in that miniseries and just do their own shit, meaning the miniseries didn't matter. If you were a fan of the run, you were getting more of that character, but it didn't really seem to do anything. It didn't indicate anything. So as a result, you could skip it. They were just disposable. They were skippable. Today, in a world where you've got most of your line as miniseries, it's just all you've done is accelerated the skippable feeling of these books. That's what you're fighting against. You've got to make the comic feel like if you miss it, you are missing a part of the lore. You're missing a part of the continuity. But, a decade now of this running amok, and you've got so much continuity out there. I mean, who knows? You have regular errors just because you got so many different versions of this shit going on. I mean, how many times have we gotten a Wolverine story? He's out fighting some, random thing in the wilderness. I mean, we've had that story a lot. And do any of them matter? I mean, hell, Romulus back in the day barely matters. Dakin back in the day barely matters, and they're using him as a ghost writer. Jesus Christ. My point is, it's gotten so messy that no miniseries carries into the next, and so as a result, they're all disposable. If they're all disposable, people aren't going to buy them, and that is the problem. You do need. I like the idea of marketing, saying season renewal, etc. That's a good idea. But you got to make things in the comic carry from one story to the next. And that I don't know how you do that without tighter editorial control. And I think you need to get on that and do it. What would you do to make these comics matter? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course. And thanks for listening.